This presentation is about the many hats of the school librarian. These are just some of the many roles that I came across in my research. The reason I chose this topic is that I am nearly done with my master's in this program. I've got one class left, and I have found myself overwhelmed by all of the things that librarians can be expected to do. This is partially influenced by my real life experience with librarians. I am a library aide, and the librarian I work with covers 9 libraries, 7 elementary school libraries, one library that serves an online population of students, and then one professional library. Now, she is amazing, and I know she works so hard, but she's also very overwhelmed, and I don't believe that she is filling all of these roles, or maybe some of them she's only filling a little bit. I've also met librarians that have large teams within their district and have one librarian per school, and I'm willing to bet that they, as a team, can fill all of these roles, especially when one person takes the lead in one area and another person takes the lead in another area. But I know many more librarians that are in roles more like the one that I work with. So I have been wondering exactly how to define the role of the school librarian, because if you do end up in one of these positions, how do you prioritize which roles you fill? This quote does a better job explaining kind of what I was thinking when I came up with this idea for this presentation than I can do. Pre service librarians often have their perception defined by professional associations and standards, and new librarians must often shift their role to meet their performance evaluations. This may lead to role conflicts, a feeling of job insecurity, unsure direction, and a possibility of work overload as librarians pick up more roles to prove their worth. So, how do we as school librarians balance professional standards and what we expect of ourselves with what we have time to do in our role? And also, how do we define our role? Because there is so much misunderstanding out there about what a librarian actually does. The public does not typically totally understand it. Administrators often don't, teachers often don't. And if we ourselves don't have a firm definition of the role, how do we teach others what we do too so that they understand too? Most articles I read refer back to the American Association of School Libraries Standards Framework for Learners. However, I think at first glance, these standards make me personally feel more overwhelmed, and this is something the American Association of Librarians acknowledges. They have a one-page flyer titled Managing Standards Overload that says the sheer volume of standards that school librarians are charged with integrating can threaten to overwhelm rather than support us. This flyer explains that the standards aren't meant to be a checklist, but a roadmap that you can customize for your community. They also say that school library standards can never hope to represent the entirety of any librarian's professional knowledge and philosophy. This is the point in my research where I started wondering if a librarian's role is actually impossible to fully define, and if this is actually a feature of this role. Role ambiguity has the potential to influence school librarians' role performance by offering them the discretion to fulfill their roles as they see fit, especially if their school administrators have only vague expectations of what school librarians could and should be contributing to the educational program of the school. While the professional standards can provide a framework in which school librarians can develop and set role performance goals, it is unknown whether and to what extent school librarians base their conception of their roles on professional standards. I want to talk about how administration views the role of the school librarian, since this can have a huge effect on expectations and support for the role. One study I found showed that many job advertisements don't show an understanding of the standards for school librarians, which leads to the question, will there be a conflict between the librarians' job expectations and the larger professional community of which they are a part of? This can be part of what causes librarian roles to be the first on the chopping block during budget cuts. If you don't understand what a librarian does, it's easy to assume that a paraprofessional can just handle checking in and out the books, and that's all that's needed. While it's great that some role ambiguity can allow for librarians to adjust their role to best fit the needs of their community, the role still needs to be defined enough so that administrators can have concrete expectations of the role. In one study, librarians were asked what most influenced their roles, and only 26% chose professional standards. They suspected this could be because many librarians don't feel the standards are achievable in their role and therefore aren't influential. Furthermore, another study found that 54% of librarians felt that they are engaged in work that lies outside of their perceptions of their roles at least once a month. And 62% felt that their performance evaluations were not based on professional standards for school librarians. While the professional standards are useful as a roadmap, it seems that there might be more needed to help define the role. When reading about the role of the librarian, there were six subroles that kept popping up across multiple papers. Three were included in almost every article discussing this, including information specialist, program director or program administrator, and instructional or teacher. The other three that were often included were instructional partner, leader, and reading or literacy. Information specialists seem to be the one that most librarians and administrators could agree on. 40%, 41% of school librarians said that this was the role they most often filled, and it was also mentioned in 46% of job postings for school librarianship positions. School librarians thought this was the most important role, and school administrators said they thought it was more important than collaborating with teachers or developing curriculum. On the other hand, only 9% of librarians said program director was the role they most commonly filled, while it was included in 67% of position advertisements. 29% of teachers said they most often fulfilled the instructional or teaching role, and the role was mentioned in 72% of position advertisements. Administrators thought teaching technology was moderately important to the role, but the majority had not actually observed school librarians in the process of teaching. School librarians thought instructional partner was the most important role for the future success of the library, yet only 11% said it was the role they most often filled. This role showed up in 72% of position advertisements. Only 6% of school librarians said leader was the role they most filled, and it was only mentioned in 36% of position advertisements. When principals mentioned librarians taking on leadership roles, they were most often in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Reading and literacy as its own role was mentioned the least in the articles that focused on librarians, but more often mentioned in the ones that focused on administrators and principals. One article said that principals consistently ranked school librarian roles in reading as the most important. I think breaking school librarianship down into these three roles has helped make me feel a little less overwhelmed. I believe that every librarian might fulfill these roles in a little differently and in different amounts, but most school librarian work fits into these six areas. Are there any more sub roles you would add? How would you define the role of the school librarian?